Hi, my name is Tomasz Poszetek, and in this video I wanted to walk you through the possible options of dialog windows we have in PowerAutomate Desktop. Plus, I will be focusing as well on the newest edition that was just released this month that allows you to create a custom form in dialog window. So let's go through those possible options. So first I'll create this very simple test flow. Let's call it dialogs tests or test. And in that RPA, I'll just walk through every single possible option we have to create dialogs. So first step, when you want to create a dialog window, is you need to go under the group that is called message boxes. And here you have a list of all those possible message boxes or dialog windows, I prefer to call them, that you can choose. So let's go through each of them. First, display the message. That is the simplest dialog window you can choose from. So here you can display or configure the title and description for the message that is going to be displayed to the user. And then as well, you can choose from one of those warning boxes or icons that can supplement the information. So let's say the warning. Then you're as well able to press the buttons and choose which buttons you'd like to display to the user. And finally, which button should have the focus put on. So this is what you can have or configure in this dialog window. And what it returns is the button that was pressed. So this kind of window you can, for example, display in attended mode when you're asking the user to confirm something, or maybe to ask them if they want to continue operation in the flow, or maybe they want to abort it. So in case of some errors and so on. And for that purpose, you can use this display message type of message box. All right, so that one set. Another one is called the display input dialog window. Now this one is just the same as the previous one. So it as well allows you to create or to configure the title, the message. Of course, in each of these fields, you can use variables if you need to. You can also put a default value to the input field you want to put on that dialog window. And then you can choose what kind of input you want to put there. So you can choose between single line, multi-line, and a password. Now, this dialog window produces two variables. The first one is what user typed in. So what was the value typed in by the user? And the second one is button pressed. Now, speaking about the password, if you choose password and there is this user input, it's really good to mark this user input as sensitive. So in this case, whatever user types in that message box is not going to be visible in logs and, well, for other users who have an access to the runs history, right? So this variable is going to become as sensitive and won't be visible to anyone. So that is the way you can secure it. All right, so that about the display input dialog. Now, when you can use it, of course, in those situations when a bot requires some information from the user to proceed. And here again, this display input message or display dialog can be used in attended runs. Well, basically, every of these dialog windows should be used in attended runs because in unattended, there is no human to interact with that dialog box. And therefore, in unattended mode, this is really pointless to use it because you will only pause the bot in its execution and will simply require someone to log into that virtual machine or the other machine where the bot is running in attended mode to resolve the dialog box. So just keep in mind, these should be maybe mostly used in attended scenarios. All right, so that about the display input dialog. Now the third one, is the display select date dialog. Now again, it's the same as the previous one. So here you can configure the title, the message, but the difference between that simple input dialog and this one is that here you can as well choose what kind of date you want the user to select from. So you can either allow the user to choose one date or maybe to choose the range of dates. And as well, if you want to prompt only for the date or maybe for the date and a time. And as well, you can set the default value. So you can write or read the current date time from the system and put it here as the default value. So now what this message box produces are the date as a two variables, and again the pressed button. Here in this case, the press button will be either OK or cancel. So again, you need to be you need to build the logic of the flow to react on both of these actions. So for example, if user uses cancel, then obviously no input data is going to be passed into the bot. And in such case, maybe bot should retry this dialog window to re-show it to the user so the user can actually input the variables correctly. Okay, so we have the third. Now the fourth. So here we need to provide a list that the bot can choose from. And again, a title and a message. Now I will just create a small variable. Here under variables, I'll just build a list. So here I just can create a new list. Let's call it just a list. And I'll add like 3 items to this list. So first it's going to be like ABC, and we add it to the list. And I just multiply or copy and paste it twice. Now there was an option you can see here that once I provide this list as an input variable, there is an option that first, it allows empty selections, and it as well allows multiple selections. But as well, for the multiple selections, there is a configuration which tells that dialog window to pre-select an option that starts with a plus symbol, right? So now if I set it on, then whichever item in a list will contain the plus symbol in its beginning, it will be pre-selected. And the last configuration you can choose from is this option to limit to the list. So with that, user is able to type in any value they want. If you want to limit to the list, then only options from the list are going to be available to the user. And what is produced from this variable is the list of selected items, or a selected item if you choose that only a single selection can be selected, plus the index or indexes, again if you choose between just one option or allowed to choose multiple options, and the button. So again, you need to build the logic in your bot to react if user pressed cancel instead of OK. All right, so let me just complete the list. So for example, if I'd like to know start that value with plus, well, you need to encapsulate it in those quotes and like mark it as a variable. So this way it will be just visible. If I just use it like that, then this plus is just being removed. So if you want to add a plus to the variable, then either you need to use actions to manipulate the string, the text variable, or you have to use this notation that uses like the variable notation to put this special symbol into that string, right? So now we have the fourth dialog message. Now let's go to the fifth one, which is the file. Now the file dialog allows you to select one or multiple files. And again, a title and a message. Now with a file filter, you can define, for example, as it states here, what kind of extensions you'd like the user to be able to choose from. Either all the extensions or maybe just specific ones. For example, when you're asking the user to choose, like an Excel file for the bot to proceed, then you'd like to limit the selection only to XLSX files. Then again, you can press here to allow multiple selections. You can choose the initial folder, so like from which folder the user should start when browsing for the file. And there is as well this option to check if the file exists. So if user just writes in the name of the file instead of to click the file from the UI, then this dialog window will as well check if that file with that name actually exists in that location. Now what it produces is either again the selected file variable, which returns just a path to a single file, or a variable that is a kind of a list that contains a list of all selected files. All right, so that's set. Let's save it. Now the next option is to select a folder. Now here again, the user is asked to just type in the description. Whoops. Just look, there is no title. You cannot define a title. You can only define a description. And you can as well choose which folder you'd like to, let's say, open this dialog window on. So where the user should start to select the folder. And what is returned from this dialog window is just a path to the folder. And so the scenario to use this kind of dialog window would be that the bot is asking user to provide them a path to the working folder. So for example, the place where the bot should save some files, or maybe to the place or to the folder from which the bot should read all the files. But again, this is an attended scenario. And now the last possible, or the last option, is this display custom form preview. And that is the most, the newest option. And it's really close to my heart because it's using adaptive cards technology. So if you're interested in adaptive cards, learning more what this technology is, how it works, how you can use it, then I really highly recommend you my other content that you can find in my YouTube channel. So please subscribe and browse the adaptive cards videos that will help you to learn more. Nevertheless, here as you can see, you cannot define like any properties of this dialog window in the basic form. You need to open this custom form designer. And now this custom form designer allows you to construct your custom form that is going to be built from many input boxes, many number boxes, many date or time boxes, toggle choices, and as well the file input. So you can really build like a small or a single choice or dialog window that will actually contain the features, the functionalities of all the previously used display boxes. So in just one dialog window, you will be able to ask a user for multiple input data, for multiple input information, and then to simply use this information in the form. Now, this solution, this custom form designer and the form that you can use in Power Automate Desktop has its limitations. So despite the fact it's following the adaptive cards technology, it is not as flexible as adaptive cards that you can design in the browser, in the adaptivecards.io/designer website. Here, everything is the layout of this form is totally vertical. So all the fields are just positioned one under the another. So you cannot build, for example, a form that has two columns, or that has one field is longer than other fields and so on, or group them somehow. No, I mean, still this action is in a preview. So maybe in the nearest future with the new releases, it will be enhanced with more and more features. However, as of today, the layout that you can choose is just the vertical one. The only thing that actually is positioned horizontally are the buttons, the actions. Now, speaking about the actions, you can only put them at the end of the form. So even if you'd like to put this open URL button somewhere like inside of the form to, for example, supplement a question or input box, asking, please provide here your number, and then button, what is your number? Click here. No, this solution or this scenario cannot be today, as of today, completed. You need to put that button as well under the form, so at the bottom of the form. All right, so let's build something very simple. Now, another thing that you can do is to design the custom form general properties. So here you can just type the custom form's title. You can as well define the minimum height and in pixels. So, how much should be displayed at the first view. So let's say 500 pixels, for example. Then how should be the content positioned in the dialog window, and then the background image. Now, what I dislike about the background image is that you cannot provide a URL or the path to a file stored locally. It only allows you to either use the data URI path or to provide an HTTP or HTTPS path to a file hosted somewhere on the web. So even if you have that file stored locally, unfortunately you cannot use it because as said, this is following, or this is using adaptive cards technology, and adaptive cards technology is simply allowing only to use the URL either through a direct path, direct HTTPS path, or through data URI string. So let's, for example, use this form to, then just one more word. So like how and when you can use this kind of a form. Well, basically, how I feel this new feature is that you can usually use it in the beginning of the RPA. When, for example, you're building an RPA that is going to be used by other employees, and they will be prompted to provide some input information, and this input information is going to be stored in, for example, your legacy application. Like in a scenario that you want to create a day off requesting system, or sick leave requesting system, and that because you have your data stored in a legacy system and you just want to have this application run locally. So instead of building a power app, for example, you just want to create something that runs on users' machines. And for that purpose, you can create this custom form. You can ask user for their data, and then you can simply use this data and populate this data in your legacy application. So that's for example the scenario that somehow arises in my mind, or that you want the user to, or that the bot wants to ask user for quite a number of information during its run, and you want to use this custom form because it allows you to request a user for more than just one information at a time. Plus, maybe you want to make that looks more pretty, so you decide to use custom form because here you can define the background and you can put pictures, and so it's a bit more maybe user friendly. Nevertheless, that is really up to you. So the scenario that you want to accomplish is something you need to figure out. All right. Okay. In my case, I want to create this scenario that I want to simply allow user to request for this, let's say, sick leave, and I will use that image. So there is the image that I want to use. I need to copy its path. Well, obviously it won't be displayed. It won't be fully displayed because it's really wide. Although I can put its path in here, I'll just use to repeat it, maybe just repeat it. And then horizontal alignment, let's use center, vertical as well, maybe top in that case. And with that, we can start putting text elements or input elements. So first, let's ask a user for their name. So this is how the form is going to look like. Not very pretty. In field, what you have to define is the ID. So this is how its ID is as well going to be its variable name, right? So once this value is returned, then you'll be able to get information from that specific text input field following its ID. So let's call it text1. Now the label is going to be displayed above the field. So either you use the text block as a label, or you simply choose to provide the label value. Now, with the default value, you can obviously populate it with any variables you have. So, for example, you can use an action that gets you environmental variable from the machine where the user is signed in, and with that, you can, for example, obtain user's AAD login or the local machine login and maybe populate it here. Up to you. So there is as well a set of options you can choose from. You can decide whether this field should be multiline or not, the style, so what kind of input information you're expecting. Unfortunately, there is no password, right? So with password, you'll need to simply use the input dialog and choose the input to password. That is the most secure one, because data from this custom form is going to be returned as a single variable. So if you mark the whole variable as sensitive, then you won't be able to see any information that has been returned not only from that specific field, but from all fields that were present on the custom form. So just one small advice from myself: if you want to use password, then I highly recommend you to ask for the password using a separate dialog window. All right, but you can as well choose here if the field should be required. And pattern. So when speaking about, for example, an email or maybe about the telephone number, you can put here a regular expression that is going to be checked against the enter the value if the value match. Then we can use the date. And then let's say date from. Then let's use again date, and this time we're gonna use it, we're gonna call it as date 2. Right? All these fields should be required, obviously. And well, we can as well maybe use file input that will ask the user, it will be called a proof. Right, it's not maybe very much correct, but okay. Well, the preview form is here. We can see how it now looks like. So we have name, last name, date from, date to, proof of sickness. We can as well put image on top, and for this image I have as well a picture here. Or here, yep, that's the picture I wanted to use. And right, so let's provide the URL. So with that, we have as well a picture. Now, what I can as well do is to say small spacing, so it will be very close to the first label. We can use separator, so there will be a line displayed. It's very gray, so it's hardly visible. And then let's horizontal centering. And the height, I want to use height as auto. I want to use height in pixels so that it won't be really displayed like full width or full height, but just, for example, 100 pixels, so it won't be that much large. Then with style, you can choose whether it's just a regular picture or maybe it's in person. The person is simply like a circle, as we know from other Office 365 applications. And let's say it's done. And now, as said, what you can see here is that this custom form only returns a single variable that contains all the information that the user is going to input. Oh, but I have forgotten to as well put the submit button. So here I can as well use the submit button. That is going to be the submit, or maybe send. And well, speaking about this open URL that I mentioned previously, you can't put it elsewhere. So it doesn't work if you try to put it anywhere above the bottom of the form. So you can only put it down on the form. And let's call it sick leave terms, right? And well, it won't have, sorry, it's just URL, and here is a title, so it's going to be called the sick leave terms, and no URL so far. Anyways, this is how the form looks like. So the user is able to either send the request or click this URL where they can read what are the sick leave terms. And that's it. All right. So now let's go through each of these message boxes, and I will show you what is the situation or what are the information returned by these message boxes. So for that, I will simply put breakpoints before starting each of these dialog windows, and let's run it. So the first display message, as said, it only contains a title, description, and an icon, plus the buttons. So whichever button you decide to choose, for example, no, I will see now in the return information that the button pressed for the first dialog is no. So in case you're using, for example, submit and cancel or OK and cancel, then as said, you need to build a logic that allows, or that the bot is able to react if user cancels, not writes in the information and simply proceeds. All right. Next, the input dialog. here you can simply press, write some information. And as I said, because I've chosen that this input dialog window is going to be used to input password, therefore this information is invisible. And okay, I know what button was pressed. However, I cannot preview this information because this information is marked as sensitive. So it's just no way I can see what was typed in here. And then even if the bot is running in attended or unattended modes, this information is going to also be hidden from all the logs. So no one is going to preview it. Okay, the next one are the dates. So here, what you can see is simply that you have two date speakers and two date time pickers actually. So we can choose this date time for starting and ending dates. And then in return, you have again the button and information about the first selected date and the second selected date. All fine. All right. Now, as you saw, the bot moved over the list creation. So I have already my list built here, right? So this is my list. I have 3 items. And right now, let's move on to dialog window that is going to display me a list of choices. So here I have a list of choices. I can select blank, so this option null, because I as well allowed users in configuration to choose that option. Plus I can select other options. And what you saw was that the CBS, because it contains this plus in the beginning, was pre-selected for me. Now once I select all these values, in return I not only have information about which button was selected, but as well information about the selected items, right? So here again I have this option to read which values were selected. All right, so now let's move on to the file. Now the file allows me to simply select a file from the desktop, from the application, sorry, from the machine where the bot is running. And again, what it returns is simply a path, or in this case a list, because well, I just selected one file, but if I have selected more than one files, then this list would contain more items, obviously. But it contains simply the path to the file or the files. Now the folder. With the folder, the situation is just the same. So here you are able to browse for the folder, you are able to set the folder, and whatever you select is going to be returned as the output. So in this case, what was returned is just the details about the folder which was selected, right? Just a single folder. And obviously the button which was pressed. So always the information about what button was pressed is as well returned, so that you can build the logic around this information too. And lastly, we are now moving on to the custom form. So let's see how it looks like. So this is my request for sick leave form. It looks nearly the same as in the design, right? So it has 500 pixels of height. It has those fields that I have created. What I dislike, what I highly dislike, is that the dates and times fields, despite the fact that they do require you to input information in some specific format, do not have those pickers or selectors. So that somehow is not cool. Although I hope that in future releases this will be fixed. Or maybe it's just a bug. Hard to say. So let's just type this information. Oh, and obviously, because I marked some of the fields as required, therefore once I selected them, and because I was trying to send this form without filling in this information, this required information was as well displayed. So now let's complete it. Well, hard to say what format it is expecting, to be honest. Let's try to just use the same format as I have in my system. And the proof of sickness was meant to be a file, so let's use maybe that file and send. Now the sick leave terms does nothing because there is no URL defined. If there was a URL defined, then it would simply open the browser. Now it was sent, so under the send information, what I have here is that there is this custom form data. So as said, every information from that form is returned as a single variable. However, this variable is a custom object, so you can simply refer to its values by using the names. So for example, if I'd like to display something, well, let's, for example, use again a display message to display sort of a confirmation. And here, let's use that custom form data, and for example, the text one, which is my name and last name, right? So for example, thanks. Whoops. Sucks. Right. So with that, you're simply able to refer to the items within that custom object using their names. Okay, so let's see if it works. So let's fill in this form once again. And yeah, of course, run. And then send. And now, as you can see, thanks test Tomasz. Okay, I made a spell mistake. Your sick leave was saved successfully, right? So this way, you're able to simply refer to the information that you have provided in that input box. All right. And with that, having said, that's all from my side around the the dialog boxes. So I hope that you will be able now to use them wisely and for the purposes you really need. And now you understand how they works. Thank you very much. And well, if you have any questions, put them down in the comments window. And obviously, please subscribe and thumbs up. And until the next time, thank you and bye-bye.